Hello everyone. Today I'm going to talk about a couple of Makita saws. Um, I use the Makita 18 volt platform. I'm not necessarily a big Makita fanboy. It's the same as most people. You buy a tool, it comes with a battery, and then when you buy another tool, you buy a tool that's compatible with the battery you've already got. And that tends to be how most people end up with a certain brand over another. What I'm going to do today is talk about the two Makita brushless circular saws, 165mm. I've got the DHS680, which I've had for about a year, which was a real revelation, a fantastic saw. I thought it would be not a heavy duty saw, but I didn't think it would really take the place of my 7.5-inch Hitachi corded workhorse saw, especially when it comes to jobs like roofing. So I've been using it about a year, and it's been a real revelation. As I said, I can pretty much use it for everything. Certainly all my roofing, anything other than really big ripping, it's just not man enough for that. But being it was a left sided blade, I did find it a little bit awkward. So I've bought the DHS660, which is a right sided blade. So I'm going to talk about those two saws now. So I've got both the saws and I'm going to talk about them now. So both these saws are very similar in terms of spec and price, and there's pluses and minuses to both of them. But unfortunately, having had chance to get my hands on, obviously I've had this one for a while and now this one, I'll go through my thoughts and the differences on them, but there could be a potential problem with this one, which I will come to towards the end of the video. So here we have, on the left hand side we have the Makita DHS660, and on the right hand side we have the Makita DHS680. In terms of specs, both brushless and 5000 RPM, 18 volt batteries. The weight on them, the DHS 680, which is on the right hand side here, is 3.3 kilograms exactly, with blade and a 5 amp hour battery. And the one on the left here, which is a DHS 660, is 3.32 kilograms with the 5 amp hour battery and a blade. In terms of size wise, I mean, they really are, obviously they're running a 165mm blade. They really are very similar in terms of size. The base plate is within sort of 1/2 inch 10mm, both width and length. There's some quite big differences though in terms of, and as you can see here, if you look at the one on the right hand side, which is the DHS 680, you can see that it's sort of balanced in a different way. So the battery is attached at the back of the saw, whereas on the DHS 660 it's on the side of the saw. So in terms of that, for starters, you have got it makes the machine a different sort of balance, although I wouldn't say it's out of balance. It's definitely different in the hand. When we talk about the balance of the machine, there's a couple of things. There's pros and cons to both of these machines, and I'll talk about the DHS 680 first. So there is, it was all a bit, and I know these machines have got to be made to be light, and they're obviously all made to a relative budget, but there was a lot of things on it that were just a little bit sort of rattly, and when you shake it about, it is all just a bit rattly. But in the hand, on the job, it's absolutely fantastic. But again, it's perhaps a debate that does go on in terms of which is better, or whether I don't think there's a right or wrong. But you've got, this is a bladed left machine and that's a bladed right machine. And I've bought the bladed right machine specifically because I've been finding the bladed left machine as a right-hander. I'm right-handed, I should say. I've found that a little bit too awkward on site, and I will do a video explaining what I feel the differences are in terms of bladed left and bladed right machines, but that's not the purpose of this video. So as I said, this is a really good machine. It's really good, you know, on site. Obviously there's no cord, it's got plenty of power. You have to keep the blade sharp. The minute the blades start to go dull, you know, you're overworking the whole thing. But there's a couple of things on this, and one of the main things is it doesn't, when you put it down, it doesn't want to stay down. So for instance, this, when the blade is fully out, and when you put it down, if you're working on a job, you know, you do a cut, you put it down, that's fine. But let's say, for instance, you wanted the blade to only stick out, say 35mm. I was cutting some barge boards on a job, and it was close to the brickwork, so I only wanted the blade out 35 to 40mm. So what I did, I'm doing this one-handed, apologies. Let's say that the blade is roughly set to sort of 35mm. That's roughly what it is. So there we go. Look, I did my cut, put it down, and the minute you put it down, it kind of just, it doesn't really want to stay down. So it's a bit, it doesn't seem like much, but you know, when you're up on a scaffold and you do a cut and you put it down, you know, you don't want it to be rolling around, and all it takes is for somebody to, you know, if you get a dodgy scaffold board and someone moves the scaffold board, the next thing you know, your saw's off and rolling, and maybe if it was close to the edge of the scaffold, it would actually fall off. Whereas on this saw, let's say we did the same again, we set it to roughly, if we set it to roughly sort of the same amount, this saw, when you put it down, it stays. It doesn't really want to wobble around anything. So that is what has been quite irritating with that saw. And you know, when you put the saw down, when you're working, you know, you don't really want to have to think about how you put it down. You just want to put it down. So that's not a great, that was one of the main irritations of that, other than me finding it slightly awkward being a left-handed blade. There's other things, and I'm quite careful with my tools, but this one has got this is a cast, one-piece cast aluminium base, and all of this adjustment mechanism is all cast into it. Now I've done a quick search, and to replace, if you break this, to replace this, I think is about £45 here in the UK, plus tax, plus VAT. I haven't been able to get a price on this one, but this is just pressed aluminium, and it's just one piece, and then all of this mechanism bolts to it. So I should imagine that, you know, if you were to give this a whack, it would potentially break. If you were to give this a whack, it would probably just potentially bend, and you may be able to take it apart and straighten it out. But I should even imagine if you had to replace that base, it would be significantly cheaper than this one. And the other thing with this one, the 680, is, and again, I'll struggle to do this one-handed, but even when this base plate is locked off, it's still all just a bit, it's just a bit wobbly. It's not really super tight. You can just see that is locked off, but there's got quite a lot of movement on it. Now I know, you know, this is not a finishing saw, it's a sort of relatively first fix saw, but there's still quite a bit of movement on that. Whereas on this 660, there is relatively no movement. I mean, it really is it's a much tighter, just a much tighter machine. And you know, I know I've been using this 680 for a year, but it's not where it was like that when I got it. But you know, these are sort of, there is sort of limitations within the manufacturing process, and I suppose they have to come out somewhere. Whether or not it's because this one's got an additional, when you turn it to angle the saw, this one's got an additional clamp on the back, I don't know. So in terms of, you know, the size of the saw, if I prop them up there, you can see that, you know, that they're sort of pretty similar. The base plate is slightly longer on this one, but they're both the same width. Another thing that's really nice on this, on the 660, which the 680 hasn't got, is you can just see down the side, there's a scale here. Now 0 would be where the blade would start cutting when it's fully out. So it goes down in metric there in millimeters till it gets to 170. So if you were cutting the edge of a piece of board, you would know that it would start cutting at 0, and say you just wanted to go in 100 mil, you just keep going till it got to the 100 mil mark. So, you know, not super accurate, but just nice if you're roughing out a cut. In terms of the base plate and accessibility, you can clearly see here that if I turn these machines over, so this is the 680, and I can't pull the blade guard back, but basically the rear of the blade to the back of the battery, here you're looking about, what's that, 110 mil, so sort of 4.5 inches. So if you were starting against something tight, maybe you're cutting a bit of flooring out, you've got 110 mil between where the back of the blade would be and the battery is. Whereas on this 660, it's significantly less. I mean, it's closer to sort of 50 mil, 2 inches. So, you know, you can get this one in a much tighter space than this one. In terms of from the blade to the front of the shoe, you've got what we've got there, about 60 mil there, and I think that one's exactly the same, about 60 mil. Shoe width, as I said earlier, you've got 130 mil on the 680 and 130 mil on the 660. And the length is on the 680 is, what we've got there, 280 mil, and I think it's similar on, yeah, it's 270 on the 660. Obviously the main differences are you've got an aluminium blade guard on here and a plastic blade guard on this one. Again, you know, that it's to guard the blade. They're not really supposed to take a lot of grief, although, you know, if you dropped it, you know, how easily would you break that as opposed to how easy would you break that? And I don't know if this is more expensive to replace than this, but it depends how rough you are on your tools. Right, so we'll come to the part, it's kind of the crux of these two, the thing that I found that actually could spell trouble for this 660. My hands aren't small, but they aren't overly big either. So with the 680, you'll see that if you can see my hand in there, my finger is on the trigger. And if you look here, my little finger, you see I've got plenty of space here. So I can use that machine all day long, plenty of space. Unfortunately, what I've found with this 660 is the handle aperture is much smaller. So when you see my hand is in their same position, can you see it's hitting, if you look down here, my hand actually hits the top of the body. So when you're using it normally with gravity on your side, but as soon as you go to turn the saw, as soon as I find it there, it really starts, you can just see my finger here, it really starts to bind into my knuckle of my little finger. So it binds into this part of the knuckle here. So obviously I'm going to have to keep my eye on that, because if it's uncomfortable like that, when I'm working every day on site, then this will be an absolute no-go for me. So we're just going to have to see how that one pans out. Sort of in a nutshell, there's the sort of differences, the main differences as I see them, between the two saws. Again, both more or less exactly the same price. I think this one, again, just over 100, maybe 120 pounds plus VAT, and this one slightly cheap, 115 pounds plus VAT. That's my view on the Makita DHS680 and the DHS660. I hope you find this video of interest.